Today on PropTech VC, we're here with Roger Smith, the CEO of TermSheet. TermSheet is helping real estate professionals get the most out of their data set. Roger, how are things going at TermSheet? And let's talk a bit about your story.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Zain. Thanks for the intro, and definitely happy to be here. Happy to reconnect with you. It's been a while, but TermSheet, things are going really well for us. We officially launched the company in what we call a beta phase in January of 2020.
Perfect timing, right? January 2020.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny, actually a funny story. So Sahil and I, my co-founder, we went to CRE Tech in October in 2019 in New York. And that was when we were, we had a kind of preliminary product. The company really started within a real estate private equity firm. And the benefit of that is that's where we both sort of cut our teeth on understanding, commercial real estate. Understanding, how deal teams operate and work, what they do, what they don't do, how they can become more efficient. And that's really where the idea for TermSheet came from. So in 2019, in that October CRE Tech conference, he and I were, in New York, kind of scrambling around, trying to talk to as many people as possible to, vet and validate the idea, right? That's what you're supposed to do with a startup. And it was there that we kind of really formulated at least what we thought was the initial groundwork for our platform. And then 2020 came about. We launched our early beta. We got an early client through LPC, an office out of Chicago. And
Lincoln Property Company.
Lincoln Property Company. Yeah, they're a big industrial investor. Yeah. So the value there was they were really willing to work with us to allow us to understand beyond just the experience we had in that private equity firm, how other groups would use a platform like ours.
So they were your first major beta customer that you could build your MVP around.
Yeah. And what we realized, thankfully,
you went pretty big, hey? You didn't go for a smaller pilot. You went for one of the big guns.
I think it was, that's a really good point. I think it was, and I'll touch on this later because I kind of want to talk to you about this, but it was nature of, contacts we had, some relationships we had, and of that particular group out of Chicago, which was really forward thinking in searching for a solution to their problem. And so it was a combination of our relationships and, again, just hitting the right people in the right group. That allowed us to get them on board and their willingness to give us feedback. And what we realized is that, this sort of idea of one size fits all, at that time is really focused on what we call productivity, like acquisitions teams, managing their pipeline, their tasks, their productivity. That one size fits all wasn't correct. It might work for a particular size investor with a particular thesis, but that blew away. And so you're like, oh my gosh, we've got to change how we do this. There's no way this is going to scale. And so in June, July, we essentially rewrote the platform to be what it is today, which is this really flexible platform that's based around sort of building your own workflows, managing your own data, no matter what kinds of data you look at, kind of like I said, a build your own deal and data platform. And that experience really helped us then kind of leapfrog to where we are today and where we want to go, which is, the data, right? The sort of the oil that's in the ground that everyone thinks or that they want, but they don't really know what to do with, right?
Yeah, and a bit about your story too. So you're basically a technical founder,
right?
Which is rarer in real estate. Although you have technical founders, sometimes you see a lot of sales-driven founders that lack the technical side as a VC. It's quite scary when you're doing due diligence and you realize, okay, a lot of this code is being outsourced to a vendor or a contractor. How did you go about, especially as you're taking the role of CEO, how do you balance your time? Did you start off by writing the code yourself, or did you use your technical skills to oversee the development of the platform?
Yeah, you're 100% right, and we actually look at that as kind of like our superpower, right? What we found, especially in the PropTech space, is that the idea of having a strong technical team in-house, combined with the real estate experience, and I'm not just like talking about surface level, I'm talking like actually deeply understanding how one invests in real estate and the pain points that are around that, we have found are pretty rare. And we think that that's kind of been our distinct advantage. So when we talk to customers from a technical perspective, it's not, oh, well, let me go talk to my team and we'll get back to you in 6 months. It's like, okay, well, once we get off this call, we will make this change, and then it will be rolled out, within the next hour or so. And we actually built our platform ourselves, right? So like I wrote, all of the code, to get us to this point. We've made some more hires, and obviously extending the team. But we didn't want to build on top of another platform. My background previous to TermSheet was always in enterprise sort of SaaS, traditional enterprise SaaS companies. So whether that was CRM, I started my own company prior to being acqui-hired by this private equity shop, which was in the after the crowdfunding space. We pivoted to like a white label platform, and so my point is like, I understand how to build enterprise grade software and deploy it at scale. And then, combining that with, Sahil and my real estate understanding experience, like when we talk to customers, we can talk to them because we know their problems, but then we have this advantage that we can, actually implement it. And I'm a real estate investor myself. So like, it's kind of cool to be able to build a product that you actually use yourself, right? Like, so I can experience the problems, be like, gosh, I really wish it could do this, because that's also what I want,
We'll dive into that in a moment, but it's interesting. I've done due diligence calls for startups we're going to invest in, and one thing that really wins the deal for real estate customers is, wow, this startup really was fast. They took our feedback, they made changes. Unlike another vendor we used who we ripped out, that other vendor didn't have good technology. It was legacy software, and they took, years to make any changes, and we just don't feel like we're getting paid attention. So I feel like this is a really tried and true formula when you're running a startup. If you have the ability to talk to a customer, take their feedback, literally as you said, as soon as you're off the call, you're working on some type of change, you'll win that customer over. Especially when you've got a big customer you're going after, right? You have to do that. And then on the other side, other portfolio companies I'm involved with, often when they're technical founders, the challenge is we're building this great technology, we just need a good sales guy, we need a good sales girl. And that seems to be the case. It's either you're a really strong sales founder and you need a good technical founder, or you need to hire some engineers, or you're a technical team and you need more sales, and it's good when you have that. If any of our viewers here are thinking of starting a company, do you think they should look for a co-founder, or do you think you can outsource the tech, or just hire a salesperson? Like, what's your view? And I know there's no true formula, but surely you have an opinion.
Oh, for sure. I mean, my belief, especially in the early days, like you can't outsource anything. That's my belief. Yeah, you feel the same way?
It's such a hard advice to hear if you've got the idea and you can't find a co-founder, but at the same time you don't have the money to hire an engineer. You certainly aren't going to be able to do anything even if you spend the weekend coding or use a no-code platform. So it's interesting because it's hard advice. Like, what can someone do with that?
I know. I think the no-code platforms are great. Like, I will say this. I look at the technical side of a business, when you have that skill set, is it's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is like you can do the stuff you want to do. The curse is, well, you can do the stuff maybe you shouldn't do, right? Meaning like, oh, well, instead of building like a test MVP where I just collect a form or test if someone clicks a button, I will actually build the product, which sometimes that's not the right thing to do. Like you should do the easy thing to test it. But my belief early on this is true in my last company, this is true in this company, is that the people, like you have to live and breathe the problem, you know? And so from a technical perspective, you know, it's very hard for someone else to like tell you what to do and lay it out, because there's the devil's in the details. And so from a technical perspective, it's clearly, I think it's important. From a sales perspective, I think, again, early on, I think you need to, especially in real estate, like you have people who, you know, this is what they do all day long. And when they're talking to people who don't understand some of the, you know, minor details of real estate investing, I mean, that just shows through. And so again, my belief, as you grow, fine, but my belief early on, you do need to do it in-house. I mean, even like we see companies that, I mean, you've seen them in this space where they build on top of other platforms, right? And that's great to getting something going, but eventually it's like how it breaks down, either because you're subject to, you know, whatever the platform it puts on you, restrictions they put on you, or your ability to kind of get out of that, you know?
That's right. And Roger, it all comes down to obviously what the core competency of the team is, but also what type of company you're trying to build. You're a data-heavy infrastructure player. There's no way you can outsource that. You have to be the platform. If you're a co-working platform, or you're a company that's got hardware sensors, that skill set's going to be different. And in most cases, hardware and sensors do tend to be outsourced to manufacturers. But if your core competence is you need to just create a marketplace, a lot of real estate companies have this marketplace dynamic where you could have investors and you could have real estate developers, or you might have contractors and consumers. You've just got to go hustle and build out that competence, which doesn't necessarily mean the technology side. I think on the technology side, I think the UX part is the most important, to really something the founders should play with. You could literally do a course in a weekend. I've done it myself. You know, I've taken courses on Udemy or Coursera and used UX prototyping tools. There's Figma, there's Adobe XD, there's Marvel, there's InVision, there's so many different platforms you can use, or Figma or whatever, where you can put a clickable prototype together and show it to a customer.
Yeah.
And the customer won't be able to tell what's going on. In some ways, when you're going to build an MVP, maybe just put the UX up, do the UX, and I really think it's not too difficult to do.
I agree with that.
You could learn it in a weekend or a few weekends. Put that together, then show that to the customer. Now, to make that work, that's where you need some back-end technology. But first, there's no point taking feedback from a call, outsourcing it or building something, showing it to the customer says, oh, that doesn't look right, that doesn't feel right. So I feel like customers are very visual, they rarely tend to be more back-end focused. So that's probably my advice to people who don't have. And also then if you're outsourcing or you're trying to find a co-founder, at least you've got some prototypes you can show. And that prototype changes everything. That really then gives a level of specificity. You know, I don't recommend old school PRDs.
Yep.
Which is basically a format where you write a big, you know, like a business plan, but for product, you know?
Yeah.
But a clickable prototype is probably one way of doing it. The other thing I'd say, Roger, is as an investor, look, as a co-founder, you know, you're thinking about your ownership in the company and you know, what it's going to be like to work with someone and the energy you have to do, and maybe you could de-risk things by outsourcing it. And if I were a founder, this is tempting, you know? I've learned to code a little bit myself because I realized this was such a big weakness, but maybe what you do is you outsource it, you get some traction, some pre-orders, some revenue. Now you've made progress with the business, now you can get a higher valuation, or you can give less equity to a fellow co-founder. So I get that, that's from the founder's perspective. From the VC's perspective, I like to see a team that's well-rounded. You know, one of my companies I invested in, Canopy Analytics, they have a wonderful UX designer. The founder's a technical guy, but very strong with sales. And then they've got a CTO that's very hardcore tech. The perfect team. In the VC space, they call it like a good hacker, a good technologist, and a good salesperson. And by hacker or technologist, usually there's a designer somewhere. So the designer, the engineer, and the salesperson. If you have those three skill sets in your founding team or your founding employees, so much easier to get off the ground.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of pick apart dive into some of the things you mentioned.
Yeah, and if you want to debate some of this, let's have fun doing that too.
No, don't get me wrong. Like I want, the idea of starting something, right? Especially when you're a non-technical person, can seem kind of daunting. And sometimes people, in my belief, a friend of mine did this. He had this idea. He paid all this money to this outsourced team to go build this product. And I told him, I said time and time again, like, do not do that. You don't even, what we're talking about here is product market fit or even validation. You have not gotten validation on whether anyone wants your product, whether or not, if they do want it, will they use it? So do something like you're saying, like some sort of no-code platform or it was a mobile app. So like a simple React Native sort of mobile app that someone could build in a weekend or something. Yeah, it doesn't have all the features, but it gives someone the sense of how they would interact with it. And he made the mistake. He spent, I think, $250K going down this path, and it ended up it wasn't right. And I think that's the problem. I think when you haven't started something or been in the space, the belief is that unless I have everything, then it won't work, right? And that is just not the way it works, right? And so I'm with you, like, stop writing business plans, stop trying to find, like, you can't do it because you're on a technical thing or you're going to outsource it to build the whole thing. Like, scrap together, a form, a website, a prototype mobile app, whatever that is, and get it in front of as many people as humanly possible that will talk to you.
Exactly.
And then that feedback, again, because look, at the end of the day, like, talk about the concept of fail fast, right? The most valuable commodity that any of us have is time. That's the most valuable commodity. And so the reality is, like, you want to reduce the time you're spending on something that will potentially be wasted time. And so your goal is to fail as quickly as possible to get that idea off the board so you can move to the next one, to find that one that will work. So I'm completely with you. Another data point on this is I actually just watched this video from Justin Kahn, the Twitch co-founder, when he started Atrium. I don't know if you've seen this, but he talked about how Atrium failed, right? And it was actually really, really cool. And so you realize, like, oh my gosh, how did Atrium fail? Like, he was a partner at YC, he sold Twitch, he was advisor to all these, VC companies. Well, what happened was Twitch was they were selling to streamers, but it was a completely different space than Atrium, which was like this enterprise sort of SaaS services company. And he was able to raise all this money without a product, solely based because his name was Justin Kahn, right? Well, what happened was he realized that building a product in an enterprise B2B space is completely different than what they were doing, and product does matter. So he didn't get the validation necessarily. He just started building something he didn't even know if anyone wanted, and then ultimately, like, they weren't building good product or the right product. And so I think it goes back to the early validation. Once you've gotten it and you need to deliver something, that's when I do believe that you do need to have those, like you said, those key players in-house, so that idea flow is constantly moving amongst the team. So you're waking up, you're dreaming about this platform. And at the end of the day, like, all the players on the team need to bring some value, right? Like, whether it's, like you said, hacker, coding, salesperson talking to customers, that feedback loop is so important.